Good morning, everybody. My name is Caleb Gerard, and I want to talk to you today about euthanasia and the moral correctness and obligations of it. So dying isn't as easy as it used to be. In end-of-life situations, the ability to prolong the life of one who may not have lasted as long in the past has changed the decision-making process and the moral implications of death and how we decide to end our life. This is a good thing, the ability to prolong life, but sadly, as with all things, the sinful heart of man has corrupted what is good. So the conversation around euthanasia has been consistent in the public sphere since the early 20th century, and it is not going away. Similar to abortion, ultimately it is a conversation around the sanctity and the value of human life. So my argument and what I want to persuade you in today is that the issue of euthanasia breaks down to three key points of debate in which we must align with biblical precedent. And these points are freedom of choice, patient autonomy, and the sanctity of life. So last year, I spent a large amount of time in an ethics class, and a large chunk of that class was spent studying the sanctity of life and euthanasia. Also, my grandmother, she had a severe form of cancer for 7 years, but she was given about 5 to 6 months to live. And there were definitely conversations about the quality of her life and whether it was worth living at different times. And ultimately, her life came to an end, but much longer than people thought. So, first, I will discuss freedom of choice and the secular argument behind it. Second, I will talk about personhood and the Christian perspective in response to the secular argument. And lastly, I will speak on the sanctity of life and how it speaks to all issues surrounding end-of-life situations. So a large argument in the secular sphere of why euthanasia is appropriate and good is that we can't take the freedom of choice out of the hands of one whose life they are choosing. And while freedom of choice is good and the motivation for that comes from a good place, freedom of choice is not morally obligatory, and it is not the highest moral standard. More than freedom of choice, there is the value of human life and the need to preserve it. And in situations of voluntary euthanasia, which is where the patient themselves is requesting and wanting it to happen, freedom of choice and right to life become conflicting values. Do we preserve the life of a human being, or do we honor their freedom of choice? Next, I want to talk to you about human personhood. So human personhood rests solely in the fact that every human is made in God's image. You can see this in Genesis 1, verses 26 and 27, and also Genesis 5:1, that even someone severely deformed or racked with pain bears the image of God because we've been created in his image. This alone suggests care and decision-making concerning end of life. We must value it. We must value all forms of human life, knowing that it is rooted in the image of God. So being made in God's image is the primary reason why human life is sacred. Life is so valuable that it should only be ended if unusual considerations dictate an exception, whether that's mercy killing, there's an extreme amount of pain, or someone's terminally ill and going to die anyways, and they're comatose or unable to live in a way that is even conducive to decision making. Active euthanasia should be ruled out completely in favor of the sanctity of life. That is where you purposefully end the life of someone, whether through injection, medication, whatever. It is taking action and ending someone's life early. Passive euthanasia could be morally acceptable only when a person would die soon anyways with ordinary care. So passive euthanasia is letting someone die but not taking any action to speed up that process. In most cases, euthanasia is the deliberate taking of innocent life. So scriptural teaching makes it morally unacceptable. Both scriptural teaching on do not kill, as we see in the Ten Commandments, but also, like we talked about in Genesis, with the creation and us being made in the image of God. So I discussed freedom of choice and its flaws when we rely on it too heavily, when we put freedom of choice as more important than the right to life. I spoke about personhood that is rooted in God's image, and I talked about the sanctity of human life and the scriptural backing behind it, both in the Ten Commandments and in Genesis 1. So again, the idea and concern surrounding euthanasia breaks down to three key points. That is freedom of choice, personhood, and a sanctity of life. And if we don't look at Scripture and make our arguments and our lifestyle align with Scripture, we will devalue life that is valuable. So as we go about our lives, let's take a stand for those who cannot take a stand for themselves, and let's fight for the preservation of those made in the image of God. Thank you for listening today.